What's good, Atlanta? This is the Block and Dirty podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. Got an exciting show for you guys here today. Before we begin, be sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, give this thing a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. It really helps the show grow. We're at 375 subscribers. We didn't get to 420 on 420, mostly because I was in Germany. And, that was a big, hairy, audacious goal. But let's keep this thing rolling here. Your Atlanta Falcons made some fantastic draft picks over this past weekend, and I'm going to talk about it. So without further ado, let's get rolling with our first run of the day. Not going to lie here, getting Zachariah Branch and Avieon Terrell on day two, that's as good as it gets. Those are steals, man. Yeah, type that in there real quick because I can't spell because I was in a little bit of a pinch here. That's what happens. Everybody wants you at the moment you're going to record. That's just life. So the Atlanta Falcons did not have a first-round pick this year. This is because they used their first-round pick on James Pierce Jr. Looks like he's probably going to be part of this team moving forward as long as he goes to counseling. I guess we'll see what the NFL does with suspension and everything like that. So the first two picks this team made this year were getting Avieon Terrell out of Clemson and Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. Again, these are two local products. Avieon Terrell is the kid brother of star Atlanta quarterback A.J. Terell. I believe he's 6 years his junior. They both played at Clemson. They both played at Westlake High School there down in College Park. Look, Terell had the opportunity to go in the first round. The draft board went a little bit different, and the fact that he was still there in the second round, Atlanta couldn't pass this up. Look, they kind of needed another piece to help round out their defensive backfield here. He may play more of a slot corner, but he'll grow into starting opposite of his brother and everything like that. I know this is kind of like a touchy feel-good story and everything like that, but the dude can play. And I think the fact that he could have gone in the latter part of the first round just kind of goes to show what his talent is. And I think this is something that the Falcons needed to do, not just because you got to get some wins here, but Ian Cunningham needed to set the tone. This was the first pick he made in, as the Atlanta Falcons general manager. He's like, you know what? We're going to get the guys who have started here before that want to help turn this thing around. A.J. Terrell knows how important it is for the Atlanta Falcons to be good. Avieon Terrell grew up a Falcons fan too. Obviously, getting to play for your hometown team is such a tremendous blessing. It can also work against you in some ways because, there's such expectations when the fan bases overlap that considerably. And look, I know the Clemson fan base is split between the Falcons and Panthers, given where it is, but it's a really good fit here, I think, for Atlanta here. I think the secondary is going to be fantastic this year. It's probably going to be the driving force for this team defensively. Jeff Ulbricht's going to do what he can to make sure that the front seven is up to standard. But you've got the Terell brothers in the back end. You've got Jesse Bates the third. You got Xavier Watts. There's other guys as well there too. Billy Bowman Jr. working his way in and around this and everything like that. I just kind of feel that if Atlanta can stop the pass and if they're just a little bit better stepping the run, which they weren't really good a year ago, they can get the defense off the field. They get the offense back out there and they get some points, try to play with confidence here. Because let's be real, if this team's going to win the division, if this team's going to make the playoffs, they got to be able to lean on their defense like they did a year ago. And I think that they might be able to do that. And as far as Zachariah Branch coming to the Falcons in the third round out of Georgia, again, he had some late first round buzz. I didn't really buy into it. Again, he was a tremendous yard after catch type of player there in Athens. He spent his first 2 years at USC, in Southern California where he grew up, played alongside his brother Zion, who is still on the Georgia team in the defensive backfield. We also realize he is the great nephew of the late, great Cliff Branch of Los Angeles or Oakland Raiders fame, if you will. Raiders, wherever the hell the Raiders have played. So Branch didn't really run a whole bunch of routes here at Georgia, but he was Gunnar Stockton's favorite target. They had an easy rapport. Branch always made huge plays for the Dawgs, and I think he fits in tremendously and quite nicely into this receiving corps. He's going to be playing alongside fellow USC guy and Drake London, who's a bona fide one. I mentioned this on false start with 3 yards in the cloud of punt, and I think maybe not 3 yards cloud of punt on on the episode that just came out here. Definitely check that out with Cody Williams and I. He's a Cowboys fan. I'm a Falcons fan. He's been on this show before. Maybe we'll get people back on the show here soon. Again, it's the heart of the offseason. We'll see what you guys want here in Blogging Dirty Bird Nation. But Branch, I kind of felt like maybe he could be a high-end Tavon Austin, ultimate kind of gadget guy. My hope is he can be as productive as Darnell Mooney was in his first year with the Falcons, kind of in that slot role that Barry McLeod occupied. Look, and this is also a big opportunity for Kyle Pitts. This adds another fulcrum into the offense that this team needs. Some people say he may be the high-end version of Olamide Zaccheaus. I mean, he's made plays here. And I just think that the fact that, I'm not saying that his arrest in Athens affected his draft stock. Maybe it knocked a few teams, off the radar. But Kirby's smart, and Georgia guy, Ian Cunningham. People know kind of what the Athens Clark County Police Department's all about. They don't care about the student population. It's an evil entity. I'll just leave it at that. The rest of the sport doesn't understand that. But the guy was just literally hanging out on the sidewalk and ends up going to jail for $39 fine. If you can spend more buying a bag of food at Taco Bell, you don't need to go to jail for the night. Not even on G-Day. But Branch fits what they need. And again, this is another a feel-good story kind of a thing. You kind of need these things to kind of help bring it along. And I'll say this. The narrative that the Falcons don't draft Georgia players anymore, that's dead. And it's been dead for a while, and it's completely cooked. And here's what I'll say about this. Yes, that's my team. Yes, everything behind me is pretty much Georgia related. It's Steelers, but that's Hines Ward. That's how that works. You got Jalen Carter. I got Stetson Bennett higher up there as well. Got a couple of Uggas around me. This is what I'm doing here in my Dooley Munson Walker Shrine. But when the traditional power in your state in college football is producing a lot of talent, it serves you to go after that and at least pursue it. It doesn't matter if you're a well-run NFL organization. If Ohio State's thriving, it serves the Browns and the Bengals to look at him. If Kentucky's good, the Bengals need to look at that as well. If LSU's good, I think that serves the Saints. If Texas has good players, maybe the Cowboys and Texans are interested in that as well. You can't be operating from a holier-than-thou sort of position. And I kind of felt that we did that under Thomas Dimitroff. Not so much under Terry Fontenot, and definitely not now under Ian Cunningham. And I also say this. Having Matt Ryan in the building, a guy who played here for 14 years, the greatest player in franchise history, he's like, you know what? I could have probably used some more of those, guys. As a matter of fact, the best player he played with is, from a traditional power not far away, in Julio Jones at Alabama. And there is some crossover with Alabama fans and Falcons fans here too. So if the college near you produces high-end players, like Avieon Terrell at Clemson and Zachariah Branch at Georgia, it serves you to go get that because you've kind of got some built-in equity there. Obviously, it can backfire on you it did with Kenny Pickett there with the Steelers coming out of Pitt. But, the juice is worth the squeeze. I mean, I'd much rather have a player like this who has some built-in equity, who wants to do really good for the pro team nearby than some guy, from God knows where who doesn't really know what's going on. Yeah, there are also, some other picks here that the Falcons made in the draft. Moving on down here, they had not only did they take Avieon Terrell and Zachariah Branch, they also got Kendall Daniels out of Oklahoma in the 4th round, Ontario Thompson out of Washington in the 6th round, Harold Perkins Jr. in the 6th round out of LSU, and then Ethan Onyanwa, a tackle out of Ohio State. So on that note, let's move on to our second run of the day here. I think taking a flyer on Harold Perkins in the 6th round is a good move. This is a guy that after his freshman year at LSU, we're like, this is a top 5 pick. Obviously, there have been injury concerns that knocked him down a peg. Brian Kelly wrecked this guy just like he did Garrett Nussmeier. These two guys could have been first-round picks, but were so banged up during Brian Kelly's final year that they nearly went undrafted. And look, even though Perkins grew up in Louisiana and grew up a Saints fan, the Falcons took a chance on it. And I find that to be, I'll touch on that here a little bit more on the show. And I find that to be sometimes, you grew up rooting for a team and then you end up playing for a rival. You see this all the time in baseball. I'm watching the Braves last night, and they've got Tigers pitcher Casey Mize, who grew up in Alabama, says, yeah, he's in the heart of Braves country. He grew up idolizing the Braves. Well, he gets drafted by the Tigers. and now he's got to play against them. Same thing with the relief pitcher who went to Georgia Tech. This happens all the time. You may would love nothing more than to like play for your hometown team. It doesn't always work out. Oftentimes you end up playing for a team you have no attachment to. There are only so many spots in professional sports, and you got to go where you have a kingmaker, where a guy wants you to be there. So, and I found this very, very interesting in the Falcons war room, or really the clips that they shared out about it. They showed like the clips of like, obviously the players getting drafted, talking to Ian Cunningham, talking to Kevin Stefanski, Matt Ryan, either Arthur or Josh Blank, maybe Jeff Ulbrich, whoever else is on the coaching staff need be. I found that like Perk kind of got the most love and the biggest reaction, I think, out of anybody. I mean, Stefanski was pretty cut and dry with everything. Obviously, Cunningham's got a draft board to operate. And, maybe Matt Ryan's kind of putting out more of the good vibes there. But I think this is the player that I think Stefanski talked about the most. Ulbrich was very excited. And then they put Nate Ollie on there. He says, like, dude, I told you we're going to get you. And look, you owe it to yourself to kind of go high risk, high reward here with a player like Perk. Like if he's going to be, look, when you're in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round, you're hoping to get starters. In day 2, 2nd, and 3rd round, you're hoping to get Pro Bowlers. And in 1st round, you're hoping to get an All-Pro and a Hall of Fame level player. That's kind of what this is. And then UDFAs, you're hoping to get some guy that can fill out your roster and make meaningful contributions to your team for the next couple of years or so. That's kind of where the bar's at. And look, I know there's been Hall of Famers who've been drafted in every single round. I mean, the most famous 6th-round pick of all time is Tom Brady. He went 199 to the Patriots. He split time with Drew Henson at Michigan. Nobody expected this to happen there for him in New England to become the greatest player of all time. But I think a guy that we've seen him play at a very high level there at LSU, that leads me to believe that he could maybe do it again. And look, I understand that like this is the other side of the ball from Stefanski. He's more of an offensive-minded coach. Cunningham's a former lineman. Matt Ryan's a former quarterback. But this seems like a guy that Brick and Ollie and the rest of the defensive staff's like, dude, if he's there, let's go make it happen. So I'm very excited to see him there. He has also been a hoot and a half on social media here, already turning heel, already hating the Saints. Like I love this. This is going to be. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm pulling really hard for the guy. I hope it works out for us because, like, when you see a player who has that tremendous talent get knocked down a peg or two, you hope that they can rise back up. And that's obviously our slogan with Rise Up and everything like that. So certainly happy to have you here, part of the team here, Perk. And I'll share like just a little bit of what I kind of got. I asked some of my colleagues some of their thoughts from the NCAA division about what they know about the other guys the Falcons drafted. I reached out to Dakota Gregory of Stormin and Norman about Kendall Daniels, and apparently he's been covering that guy since he got out of the womb. Like he covered him, when he was in high school, covered him in college and everything like that. He believes this is a guy that is very versatile. He's like a former safety who's bulked up, can kind of move down in here. This kind of makes the linebacking core a little bit more versatile and flexible. It really puts J.D. Bertrand's roster spot on thin ice. I don't see him making it. Last year, him having to play in meaningful games once Divine Diablo got hurt really said that he just doesn't have the speed to play, be an every down player in the NFL, or maybe just a special teams guy with the Guardian cap. So yeah, Dakota was pretty excited about what he could bring to the table, and he thinks that it fits well for us. I reached out to Mark Knight of Husky Hall. He also covers the Badgers there for Badger of Honor. About Ontario Thompson, he says he's a big athletic freak. He's kind of more of a space eater, that type of a player. And I'm like, okay, maybe he could be Paul Soliai for us. I know that's like a pie in the sky sort of feel for what Thompson can be. But I do think the fact that he was blown away, he was talking to Matt Ryan after he got drafted, very surreal moment. Again, he's a 6th-round pick out of Washington. We've drafted a lot of Washington guys, in recent years, whether that's Braylon Trice, who hasn't played for us, Michael Penix Jr., Caleb McGarry, who just recently retired, and then you've also got Desmond Trufant from way back in the day, Mike's sort of peer. But, we'll see what Thompson can do. And then obviously Onyanwa, that's kind of more of like a depth sort of piece. And I would have been surprised if Ian Cunningham did not draft an offensive lineman in this draft. You need some depth here. We'll see what he can contribute here as well. So let's move on to the second half of our show here with some pass. Not going to lie, seeing 3 former UGA stars go to NFC South rivals is not ideal. I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick. This is where the timestamp's going to go in, and we're going to get going here with the midline roll. It's going to be great. So there's 3 players in particular who played at Georgia, and I'll also throw Haynes King in there at Georgia Tech going to the Carolina Panthers. You have Monroe Freeling going to the Panthers, offensive tackle out of Georgia, and you also have tight end Oscar Delp and defensive tackle Christen Miller going to the Saints. And look, this is the other side of the coin of Harold Perkins, where the LSU guy goes to play for the Falcons. Look, you got to draft where you're going. I'll say this. Freeling going to the Panthers, look, he may have grown up a Panthers fan. He's from South Carolina originally. He's going to have interesting battles there with his former teammate, Jalen Walker, here in Atlanta. Again, Jalen Walker grew up in Charlotte. He's playing for the Falcons, even though he played at Georgia. That's all interesting here as well. Freeling was a very high riser up the draft boards. I've had a feeling he might go in the teens. Thought he was going to probably fall no further than the Texans. Goes to a pretty interesting spot. He's got to protect Bryce Young in Carolina. A lot of pressure on him, but hope he does the best in every game that the Panthers play, other than when they play us, or maybe not at all. And then obviously with the Saints taking Oscar Delp and Christen Miller, these are 2 guys that grew up locally. Oscar Delp went to, I think, West Forsyth, and I believe Christen Miller's from Ellenwood, if I'm not mistaken. I'll look that up real quick here anyway with all that. But look, I know it remains to be seen how much of a Falcons fan Delp was. Honestly, when you get kind of a little more rural out here in Georgia, it's kind of a mixed bag. Trevor Lawrence liked the Falcons. I don't necessarily know if he was a big Falcons fan by any stretch of the imagination here. Okay, so yeah, Christen Miller played at Cedar Grove High School in Ellenwood. That's what I thought. He grew up a massive Falcons fan. His family loves the Falcons. That was a guy that we had a couple of episodes ago. I'm like, that'd be a great pick for us if he fell to us. Well, I think he was off the board before we picked it. Avieon Terrell, who fell. So a few picks earlier, Christen Miller goes to the Saints and everything like that. And again, you got to go where you're wanted. And this is a big-time disruptive player. This is a guy that I think potentially could be a better pro than he was at Georgia. But I do think seeing him twice a year for the Saints, that doesn't make me feel very good, because this is a guy who could disrupt things between the hedges there in Athens. And now we got to compete against him twice. Oscar Delp's definitely going to be a better pro than he was in college. Immensely talented at Georgia, plays at tight end U. He's going to become a safety valve for Tyler Shuck there in New Orleans, with 2 quarterbacks in mind, as head coach and offensive coordinator there in New Orleans, with Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier. They're going to put Delp in advantageous situations to succeed. And again, I don't know how big of a Falcons fan he was. Maybe he was a little bit, maybe not to the degree that Miller was, but the dog in his family's house up there in West Forsyth is yeah, I'm going to run away from this. But again, we could have drafted him. Anybody could have drafted anybody in this draft. That's just kind of the nature of the beast there. Miller was off the board before we could have taken him. Delp goes to the Saints there pretty early as well. I think he went to them. I'm trying to think what round. Oscar Delp went to the Saints. That's not the team here. He went to the Saints in the 3rd round. So again, Saints were on the clock a little bit before we were. So obviously, he went ahead of Zachariah Branch. So let that kind of sink in there. That just kind of goes to show how much the Saints valued him. So again, and then you got Haynes King going to the Panthers as a practice squad type of player. I don't necessarily know what type of NFL career he's going to have, but he was a stud there for Georgia Tech. And I think anytime you've kind of got a local product going to a rival, and we'd probably say the same sort of thing, with Auburn, Alabama, any other schools kind of in the same sort of vicinity here. It is what it is. You pick where you go in college. You don't get to pick where you go in the NFL, and you got to make the best of it. You got to work your ass off here. So yeah, there's going to be some familiar faces for some of us here in Dog Nation. Within the context of Falcons fans, okay, this guy's good, and we got to deal with him twice a year. That's tough. That's tough. And on that note, let's get out of here with some punt here. Let's see. Let's imagine what I did that all wrong. Let's imagine what Ian Cunningham could do with the full allotment of picks. He had 5 this year, and he ended up getting 6, and he ended up getting a couple of draft steals. I think he traded back a little bit. I think that's kind of why we were able to get Branch a little bit in a deal, I think, with the Raiders. Look, when you draft well, you feel confident about your ability to draft, you may always want more bites at the apple because you're playing the law of large numbers here and that you believe it's going to work out for you. But I'll also say this, like, you feel confident in the draft in the war room. I mean, look at who Ian Cunningham learned under. Ryan Poles, who was Bears GM, got groomed by the Chiefs organization under Brett Veach. He's also worked for the Eagles under Howie Roseman. You bring, I think, Brett Thompson, I think the guy from the Eagles who just came over after the draft. And then obviously cut your teeth coming in with Ravens with Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome. Like, these are some of the very best people at the draft. And look, not every single one of them has a great draft every year. I liked what the Eagles did. The Ravens was fine. I didn't really care for what the Chiefs did. But, there's also teams out there like the 49ers who just draft players for Kyle Shanahan's system, and John Lynch can pretty much do no wrong, even though he makes some crazy picks. But there's a method to the madness here. We don't get overly infatuated with one player and move heaven and earth to go get him. If we need to do that at some point, that's fine. That's just the way it goes here. But to move back tells me, we can get better value later on, and we can make smart decisions without necessarily, we can make more smart decisions than one great decision, a bunch of bad ones. Because this is where your team wins and loses. If you draft well, particularly in day 2, that can help you get past teams very quickly. Like, there's stars that go in the second and third round every year. There's a few guys that are really good there on day 3 with rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. When you hit on one of those, you deserve all the praise you should get. Hopefully you can retain them here. But I don't know, the more I sit here and the more I think about it here, I'm anxious to see what he can do with a full allotment of picks. Like, imagine how excited we're going to be, if we're picking in the 20s next year because we made the playoffs, won the division, rise up, and we get some dude who's just phenomenal at pick number 24. Like the Eagles do every year. Like, oh, I guess Mykhi Lemon's on your team now, or they always do this. When you're a team that's that well run, where you aspire to be what the Ravens have been, what the Eagles have been, what the Chiefs have been, that's what you're doing. You're still hitting all these picks. Other teams ahead of you have screwed up. They've made some dumb decisions ahead of you, including us. And you get to capitalize. And the draft slot, the money is not as much. So you get to use your cap a little bit more favorably. You don't have to panic. There's other teams that I think drafted well. Look, I said the Falcons drafted well. I think the 2 teams that drafted the best were probably the Browns and the Giants. The Browns were devoid of talent. They got some talent. The Giants crushed it, getting Arvell Reese out of Ohio State at 5 after the Jets passed on him at 2. That's dumb for y'all. And then for Gang Green there. And then obviously, get Francis Maligoa at 10 in a deal with the Bengals out of Miami. When you draft players like that in the first round, there's no anxiety. You get to focus really hard on what you do with day 2 and 3, because that's all the difference there, man. That's going to make all the difference between winning and losing. Inches, baby. Oh, man, that was a lot of fun here. And this was episode 90 of the Blog and Dirty podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter at X, at Buhler118. You can follow along with the show on YouTube at Blog and Dirty FS. You can follow along on X at Blog and Dirty. Be sure to like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give this thing a 5-star review. Really helps the show grow. You guys have been great. We're kind of in the heart of the offseason. There'll be more fallout with kind of what's going on here with the players, the UDFAs, getting into the summer, getting into the season. I'm glad we came out of the draft here for the most part, not embarrassing ourselves. There's been years where that's been very common for us, and we didn't do that. So I'm eternally grateful for that. I'm eternally grateful for y'all. Once again, thanks for listening, and this is the Blog and Dirty podcast.